This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I am your host, Hiking Bob Falcone, and you can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media, my column at the Colorado Springs Independent, the other podcasts I've done, my photography website. The whole thing is there. Social media, contact form, a place to sign up for my email that sends out once a week. And if it's like this week, it's a day late because I forgot. So these things happen. All of that though is at hikingbob.com. And today, joining me via Zoom is my co-host Kevin Wild Westendorf.
Hey everyone, Wild Westendorf here, and you can find me on social media, primarily Facebook and Instagram at Wild Westendorf, and on my website, www.wildwestendorf.com.
Awesome. And Kevin just did a pretty exciting hike, and I'm not sure if we'll get to it today, but I'm just going to give you a heads up that if we don't get to it on this podcast, because we have a kind of important topic, we will be giving it the full treatment that it deserves on the next podcast. So just keep an eye out for that. And that's why we're doing this via Zoom, because as Kevin has found out, getting home in traffic on a Sunday in Colorado, and you're trying to get into Colorado Springs, would be difficult. We're doing this a day early because we both had scheduling conflicts on our normal Monday or Tuesday when we record this. So we're even recording this earlier than we normally would. But Kevin, I can't wait to hear your story, and we'll see how it goes.
I won't spoil it just yet, but this is a hike that I finally did after it being on my bucket list for several years now. I'm not sure why I never got to it earlier, but I did it finally, and it blew me away. It was incredible.
And it's one I've never done, and it's been on my bucket list for about ever, so I'm a little envious of you getting it done. Kevin, one of the things we're experiencing right now in this region is the fall colors, and I've been out like a maniac taking pictures every minute I can. I've been up to Boreas Pass. I did a really nice hike up at the top of Boreas Pass early last week. That's a little trail that a lot of people go to the pass and they take pictures of the old buildings when there used to be a railroad up there, and then nobody does this little trail. And it only was a 3-mile round trip, but oh my gosh, the views from up there were astounding. And I'll be writing about that in my column at the Independent sometime pretty soon. Just a heads up, it's called the Black Powder Pass Trail. And amazingly, color me surprised, it's not the only Black Powder Pass trail in Colorado, but I guess there's there's apparently one up there, Fort Collins. Someone goes, "You were in Fort Collins?" No, I wasn't. I was down in the southern part of the state, but apparently there's one up there too. But the fall colors looking great, and I was out taking pictures today and the last several days, and it's just been awesome. So I know this won't go up until Wednesday, but the fall colors I think are going to persist for a while still, especially going further south. And here in Colorado Springs, they're just starting to turn. All the oaks and elms and stuff are starting to turn. So there's still plenty of time to get fall colors. And Kevin, I no doubt you've seen plenty of them around, and hopefully you've been taking pictures.
Oh yeah, I took
Awesome.
a bunch this morning. So
Cool, very cool. So Kevin, we're going to revisit a topic we talked about a couple weeks ago, which is this idea of putting a gate up on Old Stage Road. And for people who are not familiar with this area, you may be listening to this from out of town, and this may be, you're wondering why we're talking about this so much, especially if you're not from here. But Old Stage Road is a road that goes from Colorado Springs and goes into the Pike National Forest. And it is a route that contains the access to many, many, many hiking, camping, hunting opportunities in this region. So it's an important road. It connects to Gold Camp Road, and from Gold Camp Road, you can then go all the way up to the old mining towns of Victor and Cripple Creek. Actually, they're still mining somewhat up in Victor. Gold Camp Road was a railroad line, and that is actually the road that dumps into North Cheyenne Canyon Park. I don't believe Old Stage Road, because the name is Old Stage, was actually was a railroad line, but it was also an important connecting point back in the early 1900s that connected Colorado Springs to points to the west. So it is an important piece of real estate, if you will. It's an important road that if you want to go hike on the McNeil Trail, the Swisher Trail on Cheyenne Mountain, if you want to go to Grayback Peak, if you want to go to Mount Rosa, if you want to go to the Devil Slide, I can just rattle on so many names of trails. Emerald Valley, if you want to go there, you have to pretty much use Old Stage Road. So a proposal came out, or a thing came out I shouldn't say a proposal. The city has denied that they're actually proposing a gate. They're just saying it's one of many options. A gate at the boundary line with Old Stage Road goes from being a pavement to dirt road, and that is also the boundary from the city to unincorporated El Paso County. So it's also the city line, and there's some idea of putting a gate there to restrict traffic at night because of issues they have with people behaving badly, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think we talked about on the last podcast, we talked about my days working at the sheriff's office as a fire investigator, how many cars would be drug up there and then torched, and I'd have to go up there and investigate those and tow those vehicles out of there. So things happening on that road are not necessarily a new issue. And as the city has grown, it's become, obviously like anything else, growing pains, become a little worse. So last Thursday, they had a community meeting with the city and whoever wanted to come to talk about Old Stage Road. And we heard from, and I want to start off by saying that the interactions everybody had was very respectful. There was nobody talking over anybody. There was nobody yelling at anybody. There was nobody booing anybody. The conversations were very respectful. So kudos to the people who attended. There were quite a number of people there who attended. They really did a good job of expressing their opinions in a thoughtful, respectful manner. So here are my takeaways from this thing. And let's go back, take a step back. The city is proposing this gate as one of a number of other options. The other options include maybe hiring a private security firm to be a presence on that road at night, maybe more signage, because a lot of people may not realize that the first several miles of that road actually cuts through a number of private properties. So when you're on that road, you are not actually in the national forest, but you're accessing the national forest through that road. So if you stop along that road and wander off before a certain point, you're actually trespassing on somebody's private property. So a lot of people may not be aware of that, so maybe better signage is the answer. Now, signage doesn't necessarily stop anything from happening, but the nice thing about signage, like laws, you don't necessarily stop people from doing things by passing a law, but what you do is now you have some teeth that if somebody misbehaves, you can say, well, you saw that sign, or you should have seen that sign, or that sign, you passed that sign on the way up there. And also that, now they can go back and prosecute. That, we posted it, you're not supposed to stop here. We posted you're not supposed to go off the road here. You did, now here's your ticket for trespassing, or whatever happens up there. So there's a couple of options, security cameras that monitor the road up there to catch people doing stuff. Now, you can't necessarily do it in real time because those things require either a Wi-Fi or cell phone connection, which is pretty iffy on, most of that road. But even if you go back and look at it later after something happened and you can pull a card out of it or download the information from it, by sitting under with a Bluetooth connection or something, is an option. But of course, anytime everybody talks about a gate, and it's what you and I talked about, Kevin. We don't like gates. I don't like gates. Nobody likes gates because gates stop you from going places you want to go to. And my concern has been that well, if something happened, we need to put up another gate. And there was a representative, a representative who is formerly with the City Parks Department, who pointed out that when they put gates on North Cheyenne Canyon Park and Palmer Park and Garden of the Gods, that crime issues went down there, which, yeah, that's right, but that kind of is beside the point because we're not talking about a park. We're talking about a road that connects Colorado Springs to a lot of other places. As it turned out, traffic engineering in Colorado Springs has been kind of put in this position that a lot of people don't even think they should be in, when the problem isn't so much traffic as it is crime, vandalism, shooting, and I'm not talking about shooting people, but people out there playing target practice and stuff. Somehow somebody thought that traffic engineering should be the people to address this. What we heard from property owners who live or have businesses, and the business up there are going to be like ranches, outfitter type things. There's a stable up there. There's a lot of places like that up there. Is that they're having issues with crime happening overnight. And I will tell you that regardless of anybody's stance in this audience on the issue of a gate, everybody sympathized with those property owners. Nobody felt that those property owners just didn't want people up there. Even the property owners, to be honest with you, are not crazy about a gate, but they're desperate. As it turns out, when you leave the pavement and go to the dirt road, the first several miles, I don't remember how many, 3 or 4 miles, is in El Paso County, falls to the sheriff to take care of issues up there. When you get past there, you enter in the national forest, and law enforcement up there is a joint responsibility between the U.S. Forest Service law enforcement and the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. And when you get way back up there on Gold Camp Road, it turns into Teller County. The problem, it appears, and I'm going to be pretty blunt about this, is that the current El Paso County Sheriff, who is on his way out because he's term limited, so we're on the verge of electing a new sheriff in about another month, has completely abandoned the people who live and work on that road.
Oh, wow.
There was story after story after story, and I have no reason to doubt any of these stories, that people are up there shooting, people are up there driving off the road, people are trespassing on other people's property and acting in a threatening manner to the property owners when they're challenged about, why are you on my property? They make phone calls to the sheriff, and they're lucky if anybody ever even shows up. Ever. They say sometimes nobody. So so if you look at the records for the sheriff, there shows like 30 calls in the last couple of years. Well, you think, well, 30 calls for service is not a lot. It's only 30 calls for service because the people up there have given up and don't even call anymore. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing, because if you don't call, there's no record. If there's no record, nobody really knows what's going on. But on the other hand, I completely understand their point of view. So what this is all boiled down to is a complete abdication of the responsibility from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. Business owners up there have talked to the sheriff, and this is what they tell us. I've not been a part of this meeting, but again, I have no reason to doubt it. They've talked to the sheriff, and he basically said, I don't have the people to go up there, and I'm not interested. The U.S. Forest Service, as we know, has a tiny staff of law enforcement for a huge swath of national forest land. People have told me that when the Forest Service gets involved, they get more results than they do from the sheriff. There was one person who reported they were having gunshots fired near them, whizzing over their head. They had to shut down their business. They called the sheriff. The sheriff showed up 3 hours later, looked around and go, yeah, there's nothing we can do about this. Forest Service law enforcement showed up a little later, was able to track down who did the shooting, wrote them tickets, summoned them, fined them, So even though the U.S. Forest Service law enforcement up there is very thin and there's not a lot up there, they're getting better results from that. But remember, the first few miles of that are not even the Forest Service's territory. It's strictly the county. So there's a section there where that road goes through private property where even the Forest Service can't help them. But all of this boils down to a crime prevention matter that the sheriff has completely abandoned. And here was the worst part about this meeting, and this had a lot of people upset, including myself. You had a representative from city traffic engineering. Remember, somehow this becomes a traffic engineering problem. You know who wasn't there?
The sheriff?
Nobody from El Paso County. Not
Wow.
anybody from the sheriff's office. Not a soul from the sheriff's office was there. Not a county commissioner was there. And we have people running for sheriff in this county. You would think that if one of them was smart enough to say, hey, this actually is a good political thing for me to show up at, Nobody
Yeah.
even running for sheriff was there, including the current undersheriff who is running for the sheriff's job. Nobody from El Paso County showed up. All of these people were there are all directly under the jurisdiction of the county government, not even the city government. This is not even city property. This is all county. Nobody from the sheriff's office was there. Nobody
That's
from the
wild.
Forest Service was there, which was a little disappointing. Um, they did mention, the organizer of this thing did mention that they reached out to both organizations. Forest Service had an issue with scheduling, and as you know, Kevin, they have a very tiny staff. But the fact that politicians couldn't even think that this was important enough for them to show up at was extremely, extremely disappointing. Now,
Short-sighted too.
oh, just, here's an issue that is going to divide this community, and nobody shows up. Now, in Colorado and in most states, the sheriff is an elected position. County commissioners are elected position, tax assessor, coroner. So the county commissioners, believe it or not, can't really tell the sheriff what to do. They can't order the sheriff to do anything. They can't fire the sheriff because he's a separate elected person. But you know what the county commissioners do control? Is the sheriff's budget. So if he doesn't do what the county commissioners want, they can cut their budget until he gets in line. So you would think that the county commissioners would have showed up there. Nobody from the county commission showed up. Nobody from the sheriff's office, not even some sergeant who would probably throw up his hands and go, I'm just a sergeant. Not even made a present this thing, which really irritated the people who live there, but they're so used to having so little representation, so little response, so little action from the sheriff that they were not surprised, but they were not happy. And the rest of us there who were there just trying to learn more about the problem, we're all looking at each other going, where's the sheriff? There was an ex-county commissioner there, and she was extremely unhappy that there was nobody there. The other issue that came up with this was, and I brought this up when we last talked about it, Kevin, was where does the city have the right to shut off access to a road that's not theirs? And the only reason why this ends up in the city's hand was because that few feet of space where the gate is on city property. But everything behind it is not. And my analogy, and I personally don't think the city has any, I don't think the city should have even been involved. They said that the city traffic engineering person there, who did a very nice job, he was very thoughtful, he's trying to help, but he said the county commissioners came to the city and asked him for help. My question is, why did the city even accept looking into this? The city, if they had any brains, should have turned around to the county and go, this is your problem. We don't want to get involved in this. You need to fix your problem. So the county has somehow figured out how to make city traffic engineering the bad guy in this. And in the survey that they put out, I wrote in there that I objected to the city being put in this position, and I also objected to city taxpayer supported resources being utilized to fix a problem that's not the city's problem. Now, that doesn't take away that I completely sympathize with the people who live up there. As an ex-law enforcement person who had to respond up there, I understand where they're coming from. They don't want a gate. They just want the problem fixed, and they're so desperate that if it takes a gate to do it, they're willing to inconvenience even themselves to put a gate up there. So the issue here basically falls at the feet of two agencies, the Forest Service and the Sheriff's Office. I think people are willing to give the Forest Service a little bit of a pass because they understand that, people have been trying to get more law enforcement from the Forest Service here for years, just can't get any headway with Washington, D.C. And that when the law enforcement person shows up, he does take action. So they're giving the Forest Service a bit of a pass. But they are not happy with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, who, by the way, is the largest sheriff's office in Colorado. And
I keep forgetting about that. Yeah.
Right. We've talked about that before. Who can't seem to find enough people to get up there and deal with it. Now, is that going to change in a couple of months? Like I said, we're having an election in a month. where we're going to get a new sheriff, and they're going to take office in around the first of the year, the beginning of the year. Is that going to change? Not overnight, because he's going to have to come. Now, there's a couple candidates, one of which is the current undersheriff. If he's the one elected, and I'm not taking a position on anything, I'm not endorsing anybody. If he becomes sheriff, he's already familiar with the issue, can jump in with both feet and hopefully get it straightened out. But if it's somebody else, they may even have a worse attitude toward the issue than the current sheriff has. So there's a lot of things going on there. So nobody knows what's going to happen up there. The city insists that the idea of a gate is one of many solutions. I think what might happen is you may see a graduated number of steps, because the gate's going to be expensive. You're going to have to run electric to it. There's electric nearby. You're going to have to put in the gate. Somebody's going to have to monitor it. But you may see a couple of steps that are going to happen gradually. You may see more signage. You may see, I don't know, more signage is the first place. It doesn't solve everything. You're probably going to go up there and find the signs shot full of buckshot from shotguns and people up there. We'll go into that in a second. Kevin, I know I've been rattling on about this issue for a while, but give me your take, what you think about this whole issue up there.
I was completely baffled when you mentioned that no one from El Paso County was there, whether it was a county commissioner or someone from the sheriff's office. I mean, they could have found someone, like, just to be a representative to join and have like a few bullet point statements to make and such. I know for a fact that that's not hard to do. Like, I'm sure they could have found someone with enough availability for that meeting. So I'm shocked about that, and I'm also shocked at anyone running for that seat didn't show up either, because that's an easy way to win votes and such, to kind of join a meeting. I'm assuming the meeting was just like a couple hours long.
It was an hour and a half.
Okay, yeah. So you take an hour and a half of your day to win a bunch of votes. I mean, it blows my mind that the most important people involved in this weren't there.
And what happened was the first half hour was a presentation by traffic engineering, and then the next hour was basically they were going around and people could ask questions or make statements, stuff like that. Again, everybody was very respectful. I was so happy with how everybody behaved. Even the people who said, I don't want a gate, were extremely sympathetic to the people who live up there and work up there, because their argument was, we don't want a gate, but boy, you deserve better than what you're getting. That statement was made a number of times by the people there. Even if somebody from one of the county commissioners showed up and had nothing to say, how hard would it be to show up there and even pretend that you're concerned?
Yeah.
They give so little of a rat's you-know-what about this whole thing, they couldn't even show up to fake it.
Yes. Like I said, I'm baffled by it. And I feel like it's a real middle finger to everyone affected on Osage Road. And it fully explains why, like, the calls have gone down and folks have lost faith in this and trying to deal with these issues. Because I've been on Osage Road. I've seen stuff up there. I think we all have, because it's a commonplace issue. And like you had mentioned earlier, almost every sign up there, it has been shot at a dozen times at least. So it just shows a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but those involved in not having the best intentions just don't care, because it's not enforced or anything. So yeah, that's the main takeaway. Is I'm shocked no one cared. No one that the responsibility lies on. They made it very clear that they do not care. And it's disappointing because, like we've said many times, I'm not a fan of the idea of a gate. I was not a fan of the idea of a gate in a Cheyenne Canyon, but I get why they had to put a gate there, especially because I had a certain plan or idea of a specific hike I wanted to do, where I hike up to Pikes Peak from Cheyenne Canyon, but that would require me to start at an ungodly hour.
especially in the
Um,
summer.
yeah, and I, I probably can't now because of the gate being closed, and I feel the same way about Old Stage. It's just a bummer. I mean, it's frustrating. Yeah, it's not a park, and I totally understand that it's essentially just a road, but there's a ton of things to do because of that road. And I'm not understanding why the traffic engineer is being involved at all because it clear from the get-go that it's a law enforcement issue. It's not like, oh, there's a lot of accidents on this road because folks are running into each other. Like that would make sense because we do that here in the city where there's an intersection where there seems to be a high number of accidents, then call in the engineer to figure out why. That's not the issue on Old State Road.
And it's not a county road to begin with. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not a city road to begin with. It's a county road. Why is the city even involved in this?
Exactly. So I'm just disappointed and I'm confused by why the responsibility is being put into the wrong hands.
Yeah, it's there was some comments. One of the people who was there lives at the far west end of Gold Camp Road, where it's near the Teller County line. Teller County has a much smaller sheriff's office, as you know.
Oh yeah.
Not there's some sheriff's office in Colorado that literally are like 3 people. Some of the very tiny, and when I say tiny, tiny population-wise counties have like 3 or 4 people. Teller County has a medium-sized sheriff's office. They've actually hired a couple more deputies whose job it is to keep an eye on the Teller County end of Gold Camp Road. Now, the Teller County end is a small section of it, but there's a lot of people who live up there. I was just up there a few days ago, or last week, taking pictures up there, and I was on Gold Camp Road, and there's a lot of private property that comes off of there before you get to the National Forest border, and then before you get to the El Paso County line. They've been extremely effective up there, but you know what it's done? It has pushed some of the activity back into El Paso County. So here's the other thing somebody brought up with putting a gate on there. It doesn't do anything for the gate on the other side. There's not going to be a gate on the other end of the road. Now, admittedly, not everybody's going to travel the 2 miles, because it takes almost 2 hours to go all the way around to come back in, go all the way up through Woodland Park, Divide, to Victor, and then come back in. It's a long drive. But the other part of it is if you put a gate at where they're proposing putting a gate, there's a couple things that are going to happen. People are going to park at that, that it's kind of like a cul-de-sac there where the road bends around.
Oh yeah.
There's a driveway there that leads to private property. That driveway is already getting blocked by people who are parking their oversized trailers there because they can't get them up Old Stage Road. So if you put a gate there, guess what everybody's going to do? They're going to park in there and then they're going to walk in. Then they're also worried about the Broadmoor neighborhood right below there, where people are going to start parking on those roads so they can walk up and go in past that gate and go up and do their shenanigans anyway. Now, they're not going to walk 5 miles up there to do their shenanigans, but there's some concern that all this gate is going to do is push things into the Broadmoor neighborhood. And as you and I know, and maybe this is going to be a blessing that's going to maybe make things happen, that is a neighborhood of multi-million-dollar homes.
Oh,
and they have a lot of political clout because they own multi-million-dollar homes. And they're not going to put up with any crap that's going to happen because of this gate.
great point. Yeah.
And those homes are all in the city. But guess what? If you're in the city, you're also in the county. You have clout with the county commissioners. Because out of all the votes that people vote in El Paso County, 500,000 of them are in the city. So they have a say in what's going to happen there. So I think that gate issue may end up being something there. The problem is if they don't put up a gate, unless the sheriff gets his act together, whether it be this sheriff or the next sheriff or the sheriff after that, because with term limits every 8 years, at the most, you get a new sheriff. If you really screw up, you get a new one in 4 years. Can we get a continuity of effort that this is going to keep going on, whatever the measure they take? But I think now that there's a threat that if they put a gate up there, those people are going to start parking in that neighborhood below them. Maybe that's going to be the impetus for somebody. Now, these people who, like I said, when your house is multi-millions of dollars, and even though we have a pretty low tax rate here, that's still a boatload of tax money you have to spend. you have to pay. You have some clout with the county commissioners to get their act together. Now, again, the county commissioners can't tell the sheriff what to do, but they control the purse strings. They can also give the sheriff more money and earmark it. You're going to use this for patrols on Old Stage Road. And if you don't, we can't tell you what to do with the money. But here's the thing, if you don't use it for that, we're going to take the money back next year when it comes time for budgeting. So the one thing the county commissioners do control for the sheriff is how much money he gets to spend on his department. So there's some ways to do it. But, the problem is, Kevin, it shouldn't have gotten to this. It shouldn't be this. The sheriff should not have abandoned those people up there who are dealing. You hear what they're talking about up there. It is almost like the old damn West up there. People just shooting randomly. And now some of them are just idiots, and some may not realize that there's people living below them because there's no signs necessarily on the road that say there are people living here. You can't shoot here. It would be nice if the Forest Service would put a shooting ban in place along that road. And I guess I shouldn't say that the Forest Service doesn't have jurisdiction over the whole road. My understanding is they actually have jurisdiction from the beginning of the dirt road to the Forest Service boundary, because it's still a Forest Service road. It was a little complicated, but I guess only the sheriff, it's very complicated how it works. But they can ban shooting on that road, as like they did on Mount Herman Road up near Monument, the northern end of the county, because as the area got populated, people shooting up there, which was legal, became more and more dangerous because more people were going up there. So they stopped allowing shooting up there. The shooting has, for the most part, stopped. Very rarely do you go up there and hear any gunshots. And if somebody goes up there shooting, they end up getting arrested or getting a ticket. That probably needs to happen there. So the other thing I would say is people need to prod the U.S. Forest Service that you need to just ban shooting on 20 miles of this road because it's getting out of control and it's getting dangerous. And people who live below here said that they have bullets whizzing over their head.
Which is terrifying.
Which, of course, is terrifying, and nobody should have to put up with that. Now, some of that may be that those people up there just don't know there's houses down there. And some of it's just because they're being reckless shooters. Before anybody sends me any letters, I'm a gun owner, I'm a shooter. And we heard from a lot of shooting organizations that said, we don't condone this at all, and we're trying to help. But they obviously don't speak for every Tom, Dick, and Harry, and Jane with a gun.
And I think it's also a case of a lot of people are shocked to learn that I've talked to are shocked to learn that once you get onto Old Stage and the dirt turns or the road turns into dirt, a lot of them assume that's the National Forest border right there. Or the boundary. And I think some people just assume as soon as they're on the dirt road, they can just park on the side and go off and shoot in the woods and not realizing like they're on private land. Because I don't think it tells you you're in national forest land until you actually get to it.
Right.
Because there's a sign, and I've seen a sign, but I don't think I've ever seen a sign at the start of the dirt road saying like warning, you're on private land. You're not in a national forest space, but I know there's signs saying no shooting in the private land part that have bullet holes in them.
That was one of the arguments for more signage. Maybe people just don't understand that you're driving on a road that's a public road, but it is through, on both sides of that road, private property. You're not supposed to be going off that road and wandering down into the whatever trail you see because you're actually on somebody else's property. It'd be like, kind of like we were talking about, private ownership of 14ers. It's private land. People get to do what they want with it, and you just don't have the right to just go down there. Now, many people may not know it. Like you said, people did not realize, I didn't know that was actually private property. I thought that was all national forest land. Not exactly. So maybe a public education thing is where this needs to go. I don't know what's going to happen next. It was not a decision-making process at this meeting. This was a meeting to gather public input. I think the overwhelming thing I heard, and the one takeaway I want to give people when they're listening to this, and for you, Kevin, so if you talk to anybody about this, the overwhelming thing that everybody heard was nobody really wants the gate. But even the people opposed, they understand what those property owners, well, I don't know that they understand what they're going through, but they understand hearing them that they're frustrated and they're at their wits' end because they can get nothing from El Paso County, nothing from the sheriff. They're completely turning a blind eye to them. Look, they didn't even show up at the meeting. I don't know if a gate's going to be the first thing that happens up there, but unless we can get law enforcement to get their act together, I think it may end up being what's going to happen. And I think now that there's a better understanding of it, even the people opposed to it, they're not going to like it. I'm not going to like it. You're not going to like it. But I think we're going to be a little sympathetic to it, because this is just not like, oh, well, we can't fix a problem, we're going to put a gate. This is people's lives up there, their enjoyment of their lives for living in a really nice area is being negatively impacted by the lack of law enforcement up there. And for crying out loud, with the biggest sheriff's office in the state, we can't do better than this. It's really disappointing. I don't know that if I lived up there, I would feel any different. I would feel like they do. I don't know that I would feel any different than the people who are up there now. They're and some of them are just scared. They are scared to go up there. I wish I had a better answer. There was some suggestions made to some of the people there who live up there and work up there, that what they need to be doing instead of these public meetings, that they need to be going to county commissioners meetings and making the, matter of fact, the statement I made to some of them was, if there's a place for pitchforks and torches, it's not here, it's at a county commissioners meeting. That's where you bring your pitchforks and torches and start making a ruckus. And I'm hoping that those folks do that and they organize themselves. The interesting thing about, public comment period at city council meetings in Colorado Springs is limited to 3 minutes. At county meetings, there's no limit. So if they need to take 20 minutes, each person, to make their point, and that meeting turns out to be an 8-hour meeting, maybe that's what it takes to get somebody's attention up there. But those folks who live up there, and everybody agreed, it wasn't a person who disagreed, they deserve better than what they're experiencing, by far. And some of those people lived up there as long as I lived here, 30 plus years, and they all deserve better than they're getting. And it's a shame that our local government has failed them so badly that things have gotten this far out of hand.
And I'd be furious if I were paying taxes that goes to the county, and then I just need help with something, and I make the call for it, and they're just told like, well, can't do anything, don't care, bye. Like, yeah, I'd be furious.
They have actually said that they've called stuff in, and maybe a sheriff shows up 3 hours later, but most of the time, nobody ever shows up. They'll call 911, nobody ever even shows up. And that's just inexcusable in this day and age, and with, communication with the number of amount of power. Now, I'm not saying, ask any government official, ask any government department head. They're always going to tell you they want two things: more money and more people. That's a given. So I'm not saying the sheriff's office has all the people they need. And right now, law enforcement agencies across the country are having trouble hiring people. Even fire departments having trouble hiring people. There are other ways you do that. For example, El Paso County has its own security service that they use for things like, securing government county buildings and the county parks. They have a couple people assigned to county parks. They have limited police powers, but they are armed and they are able to write tickets and make arrests under certain circumstances. They're not full-fledged sheriffs. That is an option that can be used up there. That the county security agents could go up there and they could write tickets for people shooting off the road and do anything. They could also be deputized by the Forest Service to be able to write tickets for certain Forest Service regulations. There are a lot of ways this can be managed, but first it takes a sheriff and a county government to at least give a damn enough to even look at it. And so far, that doesn't even appear to be the case. So everybody's wondering about Old Stage Road and whether there's going to be a gate there. The answer is not right away, but unless things get taken care of, don't be surprised if you see one up there next year sometime. And whether the county puts it in or the city puts it in, I still think the city should just stay out of this mess for two reasons. Not because I don't think it needs to be addressed, but for two reasons. A, I object to the city spending a lot of taxpayer-funded man-hours to fix this problem. It's not their problem. But I also don't like that the county is just punting this to somebody else, and they're actually making traffic engineering the bad guy in this thing.
Yeah, but
that's completely unfair to traffic engineering. And why somebody told them to do this just boggles my mind. Like, who told them to go ahead and do this? Should have said, no, we're not doing this. This is your problem. You fix it. Nobody ever did that. Have I ranted enough about this, Kevin?
No, and I want to say I really, really appreciate you going to all these meetings, because these meetings tend to happen at like work time hours for me. So it really, really helps that you go to them and then you discuss them on the podcast. So I'd learn a ton too, and I get this very first person inside view of what's discussed, what happened. So yeah, I just want to say that I really, really appreciate you doing all this.
Well, thanks, Kevin. This meeting was actually in the evening, which was good. At least they did it then. But
Okay.
yeah, but I mean, but your point is well taken, and I appreciate that. I wanted to write about this in my column at the Indy, and I guess I still can. But they have actually a reporter who's working on it. I've told them if they want any information or anything, I'll be glad to help them. But they do have a reporter working on it, and there were a couple news stations there, but I never did see how well they covered it, and I don't even remember seeing them interview anybody. And I'm hoping they get the gist of it, that this is, I guess you can call it, the last act of some desperate people, the last gasp of some desperate people trying to save their quality of life up there. And I think that's what this boils down to. This is certainly not a government agency just saying, well, we don't like what's going on, we're going to shut the gate. These are people up there who are pretty dire straits, and I really feel bad for them, and they should not have to be going through. If this was happening in a community, in a neighborhood here in town, so to speak, I can guarantee you none of this would be tolerated.
Oh yeah.
The fact that it's up Old Stage Road, so those people live up in the boonies, they get what they have, and that's not how it works. We're not the Old West anymore, for crying out loud, and it should be better than this.
And it sucks because I know that's the dream for a lot of people out there, is to live in the mountains, in the woods, and pretty much any part off of Old Stage Road, you're going to get incredible views. And it just sucks to have that dream dashed by like reckless behavior and all that stuff happening like right on your doorstep, and no one caring about it.
I completely agree. Completely agree. So, Kevin, we've run a lot of time, as I feared we would, on this. So I want to talk about the hike you did. It's pretty special, but I think what we'll do, and for the listeners, we will cover that on the next podcast we do with Kevin, which will probably be next week. So, Kevin, take your notes, gather your pictures, and we will talk about it. I just don't want you have to rush through it, because we're at that time frame right now where it's kind of the sweet spot for these podcasts, and people have been listening to this for a while. So, and I want to give you plenty of time to talk about it. So I think what we'll do is on the next podcast, we'll talk about that hike you did. And it was pretty exciting. So you and I were talking prior to the recording how kind of cool it was.
And I think it worked out because I knew a brief overview of the history of this hike, and it'd be nice to have more time to kind of just do a little bit of a deep dive, because I would love to discuss the history of this hike. A part of why we have so many trails in the Pikes Peak region is because of certain aspects of the history of the area, which then translated to a benefit to us now in terms of like what used to be a supply route of sorts has now been turned into a trail for us to enjoy. And you've heard me talk about the history of other trails in the past, and so I was just so impressed that I would love to kind of give it a more detailed history of the hike that I did, just because I think it's neat.
I'm on board with you, Kevin. I think we've teased the daylights out of people. They're all going to be chomping at the bit for a week from now when the next podcast comes out. So with that, Kevin, I think we'll say goodbye.
All right, we'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. And for everybody, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us, because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.